You're the clerk they sent down from higher? Good. Sit there, keep the watch journal, and do not touch a thing on my floor. This is a war room, not a help desk." Colonel Grant DeSantis did not wait for an answer. He had already turned back to the screens. 48 years old, 26 of them in uniform, and he ran the division main command post the way some men run a kitchen at the height of dinner. Loud, certain, allergic to anyone who did not already belong. The woman in the doorway said nothing. She had run rooms that made this one look like a quiet office. She did not tell him that. The main command post of the 4th Infantry Division filled 3 tiers under a low ceiling at Fort Calvert. 6 wall screens carried the common operating picture: friendly blue, enemy red, a warfighter exercise running into its 40th hour. Radio nets murmured from 11 positions. Battle captains leaned into their consoles. Somewhere, a printer chewed paper. The whole room had the particular smell of burnt coffee and recycled air that every command post on Earth shares, and the particular friction of a staff that was 3 days from a change of command and pretending it was not. The woman crossed to the rear table he had pointed at. Plain travel clothes, a dark jacket, gray slacks, flat shoes, a tablet, a visitor badge that read, "Observer, Higher Headquarters" in block letters, and named no rank. She set down a paper cup, sat with her back to the wall, and in one slow sweep she read the room. It took her about 4 seconds. The fight on the screens, the gaps in it. The major at current operations who was half a beat behind his own brief. The fuel report that did not match the convoy clearance, and the man at the center of it all. 1 bad minute from losing the tempo and not knowing it yet. She opened the watch journal. She did not write any of that down. A unit icon on the southern screen was stale. Last position report 20 minutes old. The timestamp quietly bleeding orange, while everyone watched the part of the map that was moving. Nobody called it. She noted the time in the journal in a small, exact hand and underlined it once. Around her, the floor argued about a phase line. Sergeant Major Jacob Delgado came down the center aisle with 2 coffees and the unhurried walk of a man who had stood in rooms that were actually on fire. 47 years old, 26 years in. He had a habit, worn into him over 3 real deployments, of reading people before he read the map, because the map had never once lied to him, and people did it daily. He clocked the observer at the back table without breaking stride. Back to the wall, hands still. Eyes moving, not nervous, not lost, just moving, the way a gunner's eyes move across a tree line. She was not watching the exercise the way a clerk watches a thing she does not understand. She was watching it the way a commander watches a thing she could fix. Delgado had seen that exact stillness twice in his career. Both times, it had belonged to someone who had lost people in a room like this one and had decided, quietly and permanently, never to lose anyone that way again. He filed it. He said nothing. Not yet. On the southern screen, the stale icon finally jumped. A unit that had been reported in one valley was suddenly, on paper, 800 meters from where the staff thought it was. A captain swore. DeSantis barked a correction and blamed the brigade. The floor scrambled to catch up to a truth that had been sitting orange on the wall for 20 minutes. The observer had logged the time it went stale. She had logged the time it corrected. She closed the cover of the watch journal and laid her pen across it, parallel to the edge, square. "Clerk," DeSantis called over his shoulder, not looking. "You getting all this down?" "Good. That's the job. Stay in it." "Yes, Colonel," she said. 2 words. He had already stopped listening. Delgado, 3 feet away, had not. He had heard the flatness in them. Not meek, not stung, just level. The voice of someone who had said yes to far worse men in far worse rooms and outlived all of them. The exercise ground on. The screens bled red and blue. The staff fought a war that did not exist with the total seriousness of people being graded. And at the back table, a woman in civilian clothes kept the only honest record in the building and waited, the way the patient ones always wait, for the room to show her who it really was. She did not have to wait long. Rooms always tell you. The loud ones tell you fastest. She uncapped the pen, made one more small entry, and capped it again. The first quiet mark on a man who did not know he was being read. Behind her, Colonel DeSantis told a joke about the help desk, and the floor laughed because he was the one with rank, and the woman they were laughing past was the most dangerous person in the building. The screens glowed, the nets murmured, and the morning that would change all of it was still 4 days out, gathering somewhere over a dry, gusting county none of them were watching. The friction came at 1300 hours, the way friction always comes, sideways, over a number. A brigade in the simulated fight reported it could not make a closure timeline. Fuel, the staff said. Movement, the staff said. The current operations major pulled up a logistics slide, and the floor began to argue consumption rates, the way tired people argue, loudly and from memory and wrong. "We don't have the numbers in front of us, sir," the major said. "Best guess, 90 minutes before that battalion's combat effective at the objective." 40 minutes, said the woman at the back table. "Not 90. Check the convoy clearance." She had not raised her voice. She had not stood. She had simply said it, the way you tell someone the time, and gone back to her journal. The floor stopped. DeSantis turned, slow, the way a man turns when furniture talks. "Excuse me. Your fuel math is right, and your timeline is wrong," she said. "You're moving them on the long route in your head. The convoy clearance opened the short one at 12:40. 40 minutes. Maybe 38. A captain checked. The room waited. The captain's face did the thing faces do when the cheap seats turn out to be right. A small, unwilling recalculation. "Clearance opened at 12:40, the captain said quietly. "Short route's good. It's 40 minutes, sir." 38, Sloan said to the journal, not to him. "You'll lose 2 on the choke point at the bridge. Plan 40. You'll be early. Early is fine." The captain wrote down 40. He did not argue with the 38. Something in the way she had said it, without heat, without flourish, the way a person states a fact they have already lived, had taken the argument out of the room. For 1 full second, nobody said anything. 11 radio nets murmured into the silence. Then DeSantis laughed, short and flat, and reached down to pick the moment back up off the floor where she had said it. "Lucky guess from the cheap seats," he said. "That's why we wargame people. So the operators catch what the clerks stumble into. Eyes on your log, observer. Leave the analysis to the ones who do this for a living." "Yes, Colonel." He covered the save as his own read and moved the floor along. He did not see what it cost the room to watch him do it. She did. She watched the current operations major's jaw tighten and let it go. She watched a young specialist at the tracking console glance back at the rear table, with something that was not quite gratitude and not quite alarm. She watched, and she logged, and she said nothing, because saying things was not yet the job. At the sergeant major's table, Jacob Delgado ran it back. He had heard the correction. More than that, he had heard how she gave it. She had not made anyone wrong. She had handed the major the right answer in a way that let him pick it up himself. And then she had absorbed the colonel's joke without a flicker, because the answer mattered to her, and the credit did not. Delgado had seen that exactly twice in 26 years. Both times it had been a commander who had learned, the hard way, that a room full of frightened people will follow calm faster than it will follow rank. A clerk wanted to be right out loud. This woman wanted the convoy to make its timeline. Those were not the same animal, and Delgado knew which one he was looking at. During a lull, he walked the center aisle, picked up the watch journal off the rear table as if checking the log, which was technically his job, and read it standing up. It stopped him. The entries were clean, better than clean. She had logged the stale icon to the minute, the correction to the minute, the fuel timeline, a comms gap on the fire's net nobody had reported, and the exact second the brigade's report had gone orange on the southern screen. It read less like a clerk's journal and more like an after-action review, written in real time by someone who already knew which moments would matter when the graders pulled the tape. She had also logged something none of the staff had touched, a single line near the bottom in that small exact hand. Wind. Side monitor. Red flag advisory. County. Building. Delgado glanced at the small civilian feed monitor bolted to the side wall, the one nobody on a simulated fight ever looked at. A weather banner crawled across it. Dry, gusting. A red flag warning for the county that held the post, the family housing, and the town past the gate. He set the journal down exactly where it had been, pinned square across the cover, the way she had left it. "Sergeant Major," DeSantis called. "We need you on the floor, not babysitting the log." "On it, sir," Delgado said. He went, but he carried the line with him, wind, building, and the cold, certain knowledge that the cleanest mind in the division, main command post, belonged to the one person on the floor that the colonel had decided, on sight, did not count. By the second full day of the exercise, the floor had a joke, and the joke was her. It started where those things always start, at the top. DeSantis set the tone. "Ask the clerk," he'd say when a question was beneath him, and the junior staff learned the tune the way junior staff always do, by ear and fast. A chair drifted away from the analyst bench, so she had to pull her own. A captain asked her, grinning, whether the watch journal needed anyone to sharpen her pencils. The floor laughed. Rank laughs first and everyone follows. Victoria Sloan read the room the way she read the map. Who was afraid? Who was decent and quiet about it? Who was just following the loudest man because following the loudest man had always been safe? She did not take it personally. Taking it personally was a luxury for people who had never watched the cost of a room that followed the wrong voice. She had watched that cost. She carried it in a worn green notebook she had not opened on this floor. Then she saw the thing that was not a joke. 2 friendly units, tracked on 2 different graphics, converging on the same restricted box. The fires overlay had a zone going hot in 90 minutes. The maneuver overlay had a company walking straight into it. In the simulation, it was points and pixels. In the world the simulation was supposed to teach, it was a blue-on-blue. Friendly fire, a fratricide, men killed by their own guns because 2 slides disagreed and nobody compared them. She raised it once, precisely. To the current operations major, low, so it cost him nothing in front of the room. "Your fire's graphic, and your maneuver graphic disagree," she said. "You've got a company tracking into a zone you're about to make hot. Somebody's in the box who shouldn't be." The major hesitated, and DeSantis, who heard everything that might make him smaller and nothing that might make him better, came in over the top of it, loud for the room. "I'll tell you what disagrees," he said. "Your pay grade and your opinion. We deconflict by the book on this floor, observer, and the book doesn't have a chapter for backseat driving from the log table. Write it down. Let the grown-ups fight the war." "Yes, Colonel." She wrote it down. The exact time. The 2 graphic versions. The zone. The company. She did not argue. Arguing was not the job, and besides, she had already done the only thing that mattered. Because 3 consoles over, Specialist Nora Pell had heard all of it. Pell was 23, 8 months on the tracking desk. Young enough to still believe the loudest rank was usually right, old enough on this specific floor to have started, quietly, to wonder. She had watched the clerk be right about the fuel timeline. She had watched the colonel take it. And now she pulled both graphics up on her own screen, side by side, hands a little unsteady, and compared them the way nobody had told her to. They disagreed, exactly the way the clerk had said. Pell did not announce it. Announcing it meant a fight she would lose. Instead, she did the quiet, correct thing. She fixed the graphic, pushed the maneuver track out of the hot zone, and resent it clean, so that when the zone went hot in 90 minutes, there would be no company in the box. Then she glanced back at the rear table. Once, the way you glance at someone whose homework you copied and got right. Sloan gave her a single level nod. Nothing more. No smile, no wink, no acknowledgement that would draw a colonel's eye to a specialist who had just quietly overruled him. Just a nod that said, "Good. That's the job. Keep doing it when it's hard." It was a small thing, that nod. It was also the most senior officer in the building, though no one knew it yet, telling a 23-year-old specialist that she had done the one thing the whole machine was supposed to do and almost never did. She had let the truth matter more than the rank that disagreed with it. Pell would remember the nod for the rest of her career. She did not yet know why it would matter so much. She only knew that it had steadied something in her, and that she would check her own work again tomorrow, no matter who told her not to. Then Sloan went back to her journal and her flat, unreadable calm, and let the room think it had won. If you have ever watched the right call get shouted down by the loudest rank in the room, watch the person who was actually right swallow it, and the person who was actually wrong take a victory lap. Then you already understand exactly what this channel is about. And you already know it is not over. Stay with her. The ones who absorb it quietly are almost never the ones who lose, because the box stayed empty. The zone went hot at the 90-minute mark, with no friendly company inside it, and not one person on the floor, but a 23-year-old specialist and a woman they called a clerk knew how close it had come, or why it hadn't. DeSantis took being right about nothing as proof he was right about everything. He never knew. That was the thing about the loud ones. They so rarely did. Being wrong did not slow Colonel DeSantis down. Being shown wrong by a clerk in front of his floor did the opposite. It put a burr under him, and he did what men like him do with a burr. He reached for paperwork. On the morning of the third day, he gathered the staff for the shift brief and spent 30 extra seconds on the observer. "One housekeeping item," he said. "We've got a higher headquarters observer on the floor. She logs. She does not advise. She owns nothing on this floor and tracks nothing on this floor. If I see a staff officer taking notes from the clerk again, you'll be logging next to her. Are we clear? We do not run a war by committee. We run it by the chain." "Clear, sir," the floor said. It was a small speech. It was also a wall, built in public, brick by brick, around a person, and built, though he did not know it, around the only person in the room who could have saved him from the morning that was coming. The bricks were procedural, which made them clean. Her observer badge got recoded that afternoon to escort required, which meant that to do the very task he had assigned her, to log the watch, she now had to wait at the secure door for someone junior to badge her through. She waited without comment. A specialist walked her in, embarrassed, mumbling an apology. She told him it was not his to apologize for. No one laid a hand on her. No one had to. The indignity was entirely on paper, and paper in a headquarters is the sharpest weapon there is. There was a particular cruelty in the smallness of it. He had not raised his voice. He had not laid a finger on her. He had simply built a fence out of regulations, a badge code, a shift brief line, a routing rule. and a fence like that cannot be argued with, because it is made of the same rules that hold the whole building up. She had seen the trick before in better men and worse. The ones who could not win on competence always discovered, sooner or later, that the manual was a weapon if you held it by the right end. She let him hold it. She had learned long ago that a fence built to keep you out of a thing is also a fence that keeps the builder from seeing you coming. She took the back table. She logged. And from the back table, sidelined and escort required, and owning nothing, she kept doing the one thing the floor could not recode. She read the fight better than the people running it. She watched the exercise tempo build toward its scripted climax on the final morning. She watched DeSantis lean into the simulated fight with the total focus of a man who needed this graded exercise to go well 3 days before he handed the staff to someone new. And she watched, alone, the thing none of them were tracking, because it was not on the exercise net, and it would not be graded. The real weather. The civilian feed on the side monitor had stopped being a banner and started being a warning. The red flag advisory had upgraded. Sustained winds out of the west at 25 knots, gusting to 40. Humidity in the single digits. A line on the map the staff never looked at, because the staff was fighting a war in a country that did not exist, while the actual sky over the actual post turned into a tinderbox. They were winning a war that did not exist. She was the only one in the building reading the one that did. She marked it in the journal. The wind shift, the gust front, the timing, the only true thing logged on the floor that hour. She thought about the housing area 2 miles west of the headquarters, the elementary school, the town past the gate, the training range to the south, where live aircraft flew real sorties, whether or not a warfighter exercise was pretending the world away. She closed the journal cover. Pen square. And she did the arithmetic she had spent a career doing, the arithmetic the loud ones never learned. Not how to win the fight you were told to fight, but how to see the fight that was actually coming. It was coming. She could feel the shape of it the way old operators feel weather in a bad knee. Tomorrow. Early. While the floor was heads down on a fake war, and the wind did what the wind does. She did not warn DeSantis. He had built a wall that said she owned nothing and tracked nothing, and a wall like that keeps things out in exactly the direction the builder least expects. So she logged it, and she waited. And somewhere, under the flat calm, she let herself feel the one thing she never showed a room. The cold, familiar tightening of a person who has been here before, in a different war room, on a worse night, and knows what it costs when the man in charge cannot tell the difference between the war on the screen and the war at the wire. Sergeant Major Delgado found her at the back table after the night shift turned over, when the floor was at its emptiest and the screens had gone to the low blue of a war sleeping. He did not interrogate her. 26 years had taught him that you do not pull a thread like this. You offer the spool and see if it's taken. He set a fresh coffee down in front of her, the good kind from the senior NCO pot, not the burnt floor coffee, and he stood for a second before he said anything at all. "I've stood in 3 real ones, ma'am," he said. 2 that went bad. You read a floor like somebody who's lost people on one. I'm not going to ask you anything. I'll just leave it there." She looked at him then, really looked, the first time she had given anyone on the floor her full attention. "Good policy, Sergeant Major," she said. That was all. But it was a great deal. He had told her he knew, and she had told him. She knew he knew. And neither of them had said a single thing the colonel could have used. It was the most honest conversation that had happened in that room in 3 days, and it lasted 9 seconds. Delgado nodded, once, and moved off before it became a thing the cameras over the door could wonder about. He found Specialist Pell at the tracking console on her way to chow. "Pell. Sergeant Major. That graphic, day before yesterday. The fires box. You fixed it." It was not a question. Her face did something complicated. Yes, Sergeant Major. The numbers didn't match. I checked them myself. You checked them yourself, Delgado repeated. Against a colonel who told you not to. Against an observer everybody's been laughing at. He let it sit. You were right. The box was empty when it went hot. You know why? Because I moved the track. Because you trusted your own check over the loudest voice in the room, he said. That's the whole job, Specialist. That's the entire job, from private to general. Rank is not the same thing as being right. Some people learn that early and get good. Some people never learn it at all and get loud. He picked up his cover. Keep checking your own work. Keep trusting it. And when somebody calm tells you something true on a bad day, you listen, no matter what's on their chest. Or what isn't. Pell stood very straight. Yes, Sergeant Major. Go eat. Delgado walked back onto the floor and looked at the screens, and then at the colonel pacing in front of them, and then at the side monitor where the wind warning crawled red across the bottom, ignored. And the watcher did the math that the watcher always does, the math that frames everything that comes after. If she was who he thought she was, and he had been right about people for 26 years, then the most useful thing on this floor was being treated like furniture, and the man in charge was running hard toward an edge he could not see, with a graded exercise in one hand and his own certainty in the other. The smart move, Delgado thought, would be for the colonel to walk himself back from that edge before he hit it. But the loud ones never do. That was the whole sad shape of it. They run at the edge faster, because the edge looks like the only thing left that might prove them as big as they sound. He looked once more at the woman logging a war that nobody else in the building could see, and he found himself wanting, badly, to know who she had been before she walked through that door. Because whoever she was, the colonel had spent 3 days insulting her, and the bill for that was going to come due, and Delgado did not think it was going to be quiet. You were about to find out who she was, long before she ever walked into this room, and once you know, you will not be able to watch the colonel the same way again. Subscribe and stay with it. This is the part of the story that earns everything that comes after. Her transient quarters at 2300 hours held almost nothing. A made bunk, a duffel she had barely opened, and on the small desk, 3 things she had carried for 15 years. A worn green notebook, a single dull challenge coin, and a photograph, folded soft at the creases, of a young soldier grinning under a radio handset with the sun behind him. This is the only place in the story where we go inside her, because it is the only place she ever let anyone in. Not the floor. Us. She had logged a war for a man who called her a clerk, and the last time she had run a room like his, the room had been on fire, the radios had been screaming, and the man who was supposed to be in charge was already dead. 2011, Eastern Afghanistan, a combat outpost the size of a soccer field, clinging to the side of a valley, ringed with wire and sandbags, and the kind of dark that has weight. Major Victoria Sloan was 37 years old, and the battalion operations officer, the S3, visiting the outpost to walk the ground before an operation. She was supposed to be a passenger that night. The enemy did not check the manifest. The first mortars came at 0400. Then the machine guns from 3 sides at once, a complex attack, coordinated, close. The opening salvo killed the company commander, Captain Neil Garber, in the first 90 seconds, in the doorway of the Tactical Operations Center, and the company net dissolved into the particular sound that haunts every operations officer alive. The sound of frightened men all keying their radios at once so that no one can talk and everyone is screaming. Sloan took the handset. She did not remember deciding to. She remembered the weight of it, the plastic warm from Garber's hand, and she remembered making her voice flat, flatter than she felt, flat as still water, because she had learned somewhere that a room full of terror will follow calm before it follows rank, and calm was the only thing she had enough of. Every station. "This is Warden," she said, and the call sign was something she made up in that second and kept for the rest of her life. "I have the fight. Listen to my voice and nobody else." For 2 hours she ran it. She brought fire's danger close, walking high explosive rounds into within 200 meters of her own wire, because the alternative was the wire being overrun. She talked in attack aviation in the dark, deconflicting the gun runs by voice, by feel, by the map in her head. She held a perimeter she could not see by being the one steady thing on a net full of dying men. And it cost. It always costs. Private First Class Andre Boone, her radio operator, 19 years old, the grinning boy in the folded photograph, was killed at her shoulder in the second hour by a round that should have found her instead. She kept transmitting on his radio. She had to. Stopping meant more dead than him. She has never fully forgiven herself for how steady her voice stayed in the minutes after, and she has never once believed she had a choice. At first light, when the valley went quiet and the gunships owned the sky, she carried Specialist Quincy Lott 400 meters to the aid station, with his blood soaking through her uniform, because the litter teams were overwhelmed and he was breathing, and she could carry. Lott lived. He has 3 children now. He sends her a message every year on the anniversary, and she answers every one, and she has never told him what it cost her to set him down at the aid station and walk back to the radio. They gave her the Silver Star for that morning. The citation is 4 paragraphs long and says almost nothing true. It used words like gallantry and intrepidity, clean words, ceremony words, and none of them held the weight of a 19-year-old's blood on a radio handset or the particular silence of a valley at first light when the shooting finally stops and you start counting. The truth was the call sign. Warden, the one who holds the gate. She had been a major then, 37 years old, and she had understood for the first time that command was not the chair or the rank or the loud voice. Command was the willingness to be the calm one when calm cost everything you had. She had carried that understanding through 15 years and 4 promotions, all the way to a back table in a war room where a colonel called her a clerk, and never once guessed that the quietest person in his building was the only one who had ever actually held a gate. In the quarters at Fort Calvert, 15 years later, the woman who held the gate looked at her phone. The red flag warning had upgraded again. Sustained winds, gusting higher by dawn. Extreme. She set the coin on the green notebook. She looked at Boone's photograph once, the way you touch a bruise to see if it still hurts. And it did, the way it always would. "Not on my floor," she said aloud, to no one in the dark. She did not sleep. She had been here before, on a worse night, and she knew the shape of what the morning was going to ask of her. It was going to ask the same thing the outpost had asked, and she already knew her answer. She had known it for 15 years. The final morning of the exercise broke dry and hard, the wind already up, and at 0710 the real war walked into the room the fake one was fighting. It came as 2 calls, almost on top of each other. Range control, voice tight. An observation aircraft was down on the southern training range. A small one, 2 crew, injured, hard landing in scrub that was already starting to burn. And base operations, a beat behind. A wildland fire, wind-driven, west to east, jumping a containment line and running toward the post's family housing and the town past the gate. The floor had everything it needed to answer. Aircraft, comms, the authority to move. Medevac on standby, a path to the firefighting aircraft inbound from the state. An evacuation plan that lived in a binder 6 feet from the colonel. And the floor did not move, because the floor was locked onto a war that did not exist, and the man who owned the floor would not let go of it. "We do not break a warfighter for a brush fire," DeSantis said. His voice was loud and certain and exactly wrong. "Range Control owns the downed aircraft. Base Ops owns the fire. We stay on the problem set. We are being graded, people. Eyes front." On the Range Control net, a young controller's voice climbed half an octave. He had 2 injured crew on the ground, fire in the scrub 100 meters from the wreck, and a medevac asking him for a deconfliction he did not have the authority to give. On the base operations line, a watch officer was reading wind speeds off a screen and asking, twice, whether the housing area evacuation order had been signed, and getting no answer, because the only people with the picture and the authority to fuse it were standing in this room arguing about a war that was not real. The pieces were all on the table. 2 injured aircrew, 3 firefighting aircraft inbound, and a medevac aloft, all converging on one patch of sky over one burning range. A school, a housing area, a town, and a wall of fire doing 35 knots toward them with the wind at its back. Everything needed to fix it was in this room. The only missing piece was a person willing to stop fighting the imaginary war long enough to see the real one. Victoria Sloan stood up. She had not stood in 4 days. She crossed to the current operations huddle, unhurried, and she laid the real problem out in 4 sentences, flat as still water. "You have a medevac and 3 firefighting aircraft about to want the same airspace over the same range, with no one deconflicting them," she said. "You have an evacuation route for the housing area that the fire cuts in about 20 minutes. You have 2 injured aircrew in burning scrub and a window to reach them measured in single digits. And you have everything you need to fix all of it in this room, right now." The floor went silent. 11 nets murmured into it. And Colonel DeSantis, humiliated to be corrected by the clerk in front of the staff he was about to hand off, made the worst decision of his career. "Specialist Pell," he said, not looking at Sloan. "Walk the observer off my floor. Now. She does not belong here, and I will not have my final exercise hijacked by a—" He never finished it. Because Victoria Sloan smiled at him. It was the first expression she had shown in 4 days. Small, certain, almost kind. It was the smile of a person who has just been handed, by an arrogant man, the exact and total permission she needed. And who knows, with 15 years of certainty, precisely what she is about to do with it. Specialist Pell did not move. She stood frozen between an order that sounded lawful and a gut that was screaming, and she looked, for 1/2 second, at the woman she had learned to trust over the colonel's volume. Sergeant Major Jacob Delgado stepped to the center of the floor, and the room tipped, everyone on it feeling the floor move under them without yet understanding why, the way you feel a train start before you see the platform slide. Sloan did not walk toward the door. She walked toward the command chair. Victoria Sloan took the floor the way she had taken the handset in 2011, by being the calmest object in a room full of motion. "Battle Captain," she said. "Give me the medevac on Freck 2. Firefighting aircraft deconflict above 3,000 feet. Medevac low and east. Nobody crosses the range center line without my call. Move the housing area gate now. We are not waiting for the fire to vote. Get me range control on a hard line. Pell, plot the fire's leading edge against the evacuation route and give me minutes, not adjectives." The orders were clean, fast, and exactly right. And the floor did the thing floors do when someone finally gives them tempo to instead of volume. It followed. Not because of rank. No one had seen any rank. But because every person in that room had been waiting, for 3 days, for one calm voice to listen to. And here it was. Pell's hands flew. "Edge hits the evac route in 11 minutes, ma'am. Housing's got maybe 20 before the gate's no good." Then we move now. And we have 9 minutes to spare, Sloan said. Battle Captain, evacuation order to the housing area, my authority. Medevac, you are cleared to the downed aircraft, low and east. Fire tankers are high and west. You will not see each other, and that is the point. The range control net came back, steadier now that someone on the other end sounded like they had done this before. Medevac's asking who's deconflicting, ma'am. They want a name. Tell them Warden has the airspace, Sloan said, and the word came out of her without thought, 15 years old and worn smooth. Center line is mine. Nobody crosses it without my call. Push the tankers their run-in heading and hold the medevac 30 seconds. I want the first tanker's smoke down before that bird crosses the line so the pilot can see what he's flying into. Pell, when that gate clears, I want the school bus convoy out the north gate, not the west. West is into the smoke. North gate, aye, Pell said, already typing. Convoys rolling. 30 seconds. The first tanker laid its line. The medevac crossed low and east, under a sky the firefighting aircraft owned high and west, and the two never saw each other, exactly as she had said, because that was the entire point. Tempo flattened around her. The panic drained out of the room, and competence rushed in to fill the space, and Specialist Pell worked to the calm woman at the center of the floor, and not to the colonel standing rigid at the edge of it. That was when the recalibration happened. Quiet and total. Sergeant Major Delgado came to attention. He brought his hand up in a salute that was 26 years exact, and he said one word, and the word carried across the whole floor. Ma'am. The side door opened. Major General Walt Drummond walked in, the outgoing commanding general of the 4th Infantry Division, 2 stars, the man whose chair Sloan was 3 days from taking, and he took in the floor in a single glance. The crisis, the calm, and the woman in civilian clothes running it from the center. On the wall, the higher headquarters video tile resolved, and a staff officer at Corps read the line that closed the trap. Incoming Commander, 4th Infantry Division, confirmed on station. The battle captain's voice cracked the room open. Attention in the command post, the commanding general. The floor came to attention, not a spectacle, not a theatrical wave of salutes on a shouted call sign. Just a room of soldiers standing up straight, fast and clean, for the general who had been logging their watch journal for 3 days. Major General Drummond looked at her and almost smiled. General Sloan, he said, looks like the division's yours a few days early. Carry on. And Colonel Grant DeSantis's face did the whole terrible arithmetic at once. Confusion first. Why was the room standing for the clerk? Why was the sergeant major saluting the observer? Then disbelief, as the video tile and the 2-star and the name all landed in the same half-second and refused to be anything but true. Then recognition, slow and sick. The observer had never been an observer. Then horror, pure and total, as 4 days of his own words played back in his head all at once. Clerk, help desk, owns nothing, walk her off my floor. Every one of them said to the woman who now commanded him, the woman who was, at this moment, calmly saving the exercise he had refused to break, and the town he had refused to see. He came to attention last, and slowest, the only man on the floor still catching up to a truth that a sergeant major had read on the first day, off nothing but the way she sat with her back to the wall and her eyes moving. Sloan did not look at him. She did not raise her voice. She returned Drummond's courtesy with a nod, returned Delgado's salute, and turned back to the screens where 2 injured aircrew were waiting in burning scrub, and a town was emptying ahead of a wall of fire. Carry on, she said to the floor. We have people on that range. Let's go get them. And she left Colonel DeSantis standing at attention behind her, behind the woman he had called a clerk, while the war room he thought he owned bent itself, fast and grateful, to the quiet voice it should have been listening to all along. The fight she actually cared about, she won in the next 90 minutes. The medevac reached the downed aircrew at 0731, low and east exactly as she had called it, and lifted both injured crew members out of the burning scrub before the fire reached the wreck. The firefighting aircraft worked high and west, deconflicted to the second, and laid their lines across the leading edge of the fire short of the housing area. The evacuation gate moved 9 minutes before the fire would have cut the route, and the family housing emptied clean. No injuries, no one trapped. A school bus convoy rolling out the north gate, while the sky went orange behind it. The floor that had laughed at a clerk ran a real, no-notice, life-or-death mission flawlessly, because for 90 minutes, it finally had what it had been missing for 3 days. Someone who knew the difference between the war on the screen and the war at the wire. She never raised her voice once. She asked for minutes instead of adjectives, names instead of opinions, and one decision at a time. And the floor gave them to her because she had given it the only thing it had truly needed, a reason to be calm. The school buses cleared the north gate at 0744. The last family was out of the housing area at 0751, with 4 minutes to spare on a window she had bought them by moving 9 minutes early. By 0900, the fire was checked short of the first house. The aircrew were in surgery and stable, and the exercise, the fake war, the graded one, was formally terminated. No one cared about the grade anymore. The grade had stopped mattering the moment the real thing walked in. Then came the reckoning. And this is where Victoria Sloan did the thing the loud ones never expect. She did not destroy him. She took Colonel DeSantis aside, alone, no audience, into the small briefing room off the floor. There was no crime to charge. He had been arrogant, not criminal. Wrong, not corrupt. There would be no court-martial, no investigation, no career-ending memorandum sliding into a file. She had watched enough good people get fed to the machine to know that the machine was not the same thing as justice, and she did not reach for it. She told him the truth instead, quietly and exactly, which was worse and better than any of it. "I'm not going to end you, Colonel," she said. "You ran 4 days by who wore rank, and you never once listened to the person doing the work. This morning, that habit nearly cost 2 aircrew and a housing area. That's the lesson. You don't get to outrun it." She let it sit. "I'm keeping you as my G3, on one condition, that you learn the difference between authority and being right. Earn the floor back or leave on your own. Your call. But you will know, every day, exactly what you almost did with it." He had no paragraph for that. For the first time in 4 days, Colonel DeSantis had nothing to say. He said, "Yes, ma'am." And it was the most honest thing he had said since she walked through the door. Then she found Specialist Nora Pell, and she named her by name in front of the sergeant major. "You were right on day 3, and you fixed it without making it a fight," Sloan said. "You trusted your own check over a colonel's volume. That is the whole job, Specialist. From private to general, that is the entire job." "Sergeant Major, I want her on a battle NCO leadership track. That's an order I'm going to enjoy signing." The most dangerous person in a room is almost never the loudest one. If watching the quiet one finally take the chair landed for you, if you have ever been the one logging the watch while the loud man took the credit, then you already know why this channel exists, and the comments and the subscribe button are exactly how it keeps telling these stories. Drop a line. Stay for the next one. The war room emptied. The screens dimmed to that low sleeping blue. And Victoria Sloan, Major General, United States Army, sat down in the command chair for the first watch under her command and pulled the watch journal across the desk, the clerk's journal, the one DeSantis had handed her on a Monday as an insult, and she opened it to a clean page and logged the first entry herself. The time, the date, 3 words in a small, exact hand. Commanding General assumes command. No phone. No coded message. No far-off theater waiting in the dark. Just a woman, a journal, and a quiet room that finally knew who she was. She had been handed that journal as an insult on a Monday. She kept it, on a Friday, as the first honest record of her command. She capped the pen and laid it square across the closed cover, parallel to the edge, the way she had laid it down 4 days before when no one in the building knew her name. Outside, the wind was dropping. The fire was out. The town was whole. Every soldier carries a story that few ever hear. Listen with your heart. Thank you for staying and watching. Subscribe to Honor Tales for more.